It's become such a hyper-politicized matter.
Racing for a massive migrant caravan making its way through Mexico.
The Biden administration didn't do its job.
Mexico, and CBP says that they deployed physical barriers to stop this.
Biden just failed the fundamental principle of government, which is just to get control of that border, and obviously we didn't, and I think that played a big role in the election.
Breaking news, more student walkouts and protests of President Trump's immigration and deportation policies.
President Trump's mass deportation plan coming together.
If you look at the demographics of who the immigrants are, it's not going to be long until we have lots of cases highlighted, not these child sex offenders or drug dealers, but it's these families, the low-hanging fruit. It's just inevitable. You can't deport 2 million people in this country and not be hitting that population pretty hard. It's who they are.
All right, here we go. John Sandweg. Wow. Thank you for taking the time with us today. Lots to talk about, lots in the news. You were the acting director of ICE, so you know of which you speak under President Obama, a.k.a. Deporter-in-Chief, which I want to talk about. Also, you worked as the acting general counsel for Department of Homeland Security, and now a partner of Nixon Peabody, leading the cross-border risks team. So, you're an expert on all things immigration, and ICE obviously is in the press right now. And we did I think 2 or 3 of our most popular episodes on this show have been about the border, and I actually was on Joe Rogan, and I was talking about open borders, and you see the footage of the gates opening.
Literally, the Biden administration has been telling us for 2 years now that the border is closed, yet we now have literal video evidence of them opening the border that the Texas authorities had closed.
The reason why I got into this, you see the gates opening up and
Right.
people coming through, and I'm like, hold on a second. I've been reporting on the border for 10 years. There's no gate where people run through the gate, right?
Right.
And then you look into the thing, and it's like, oh yeah, like that was before the border, it's after the border. Just the flood of comments. There is a gate, and the gate's open, and it's open borders. So I wanna get into that. A, open borders. B, Mexico. See the politicization of this, and there's your version and my version, and ne'er the twain shall meet. I think it's become such a hyper politicized matter that and I have 75 different starts. We can start with macro if you want, or we can start with what's in the press. But I was just, as I was saying, President Obama, Deporter-in-Chief. What I find funny about this issue is it's become a very Republican, Democrat sort of war of words, war of press. And when you look back in it, I mean, Reagan was very pro-immigration, and he was the guiding light of the Republican Party, and the Democratic Party more aligned with, let's say, unions and stuff. We're sort of anti-immigration. And now we've switched, and by the way, switched in. So let's start with that. Deporter-in-Chief and the press around it. So during this last election, the narrative was criminals are coming across, open borders, gates open, they're just coming in streams, and then it became ridiculous about the eating the cats and the dogs and all this stuff. But Republicans, I think we can all admit, won that narrative because they were like, there's open borders, it's chaos, it's terrible. And the Democratic response was, well, it's highly nuanced, and there's a problem in asylum and illegal versus legal. The press right now is there's a trickle at the border. It's sort of stopped. We've got control of it. And so they're winning that narrative as well. Is that true?
Yeah, Shane, look, I mean, let's just begin with the Biden administration. Everybody was right on that. There were complicated reasons why the border was the way it was. But the bottom line also is the Biden administration didn't do its job. You just can't have that many people crossing the border.
DraftKings Casino is on fire right now. Download the app and sign in with code SHANE, that's SHANE, and take the featured slot for a spin and explore thousands of others on the DraftKings game library. Check back daily to claim the hottest offers and promos on DraftKings Casino. The crown is yours, baby.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. 21 and over. Physically present in Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, West Virginia only. Void in Connecticut and Ontario. Eligibility restrictions apply. New customers only. Non-withdrawable casino spins valid for featured game only and expire in 168 hours. See terms at casino.draftkings.com/promos. Ends June 15th, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time.
Now, the solutions were complicated, and Biden adopted one that actually worked. He just did it very late in his term, right? In June, they modified the asylum rules that made it a lot harder for those migrants to claim asylum, which was really one of the big pulls that was pulling them here across the border.
Yeah.
The numbers started dropping dramatically. I'll give Trump credit. His rhetoric and his actions on top of Biden's have kind of finished off what we had seen for that 8-year period at the border.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean our border problems are solved. We're going to have some more challenges, but it's certainly the numbers that they just announced are incredibly low.
The month of March saw the lowest Southwest border crossings in history.
Now, the Border Patrol data from this past month show that just over 7,000 Southwest border crossings were recorded, a dramatic drop compared to the monthly average of 155,000 from the previous 4 years.
To give them credit, they are very, very low numbers. But the bottom line here is that, everybody's right in a sense when it comes to immigration, and you're right, it's become so politicized.
Yeah.
But there was nuanced and complicated reasons why Biden struggled at the border, but it's also fair to say that at the end of the day, Biden just failed the fundamental principle of government, which is just to do your job and get control of that border. And obviously we didn't. And I think that played a big role in the election.
Definitely played a big role in the election. The other problem was the sort of, usually you have a right, attack and a left, the defense. The defense was non-existent. It was like, well, it's kind of. So it seems that there's two major issues whenever you dig in on this that are sort of at the heart of the matter that never really get discussed. And one is illegal versus legal immigration.
Yeah.
We have a terrible I'm a legal immigrant, so we have a terrible legal. I believe the number's like 65,000, like for workers or whatever, unskilled workers. Like the number is just ridiculously low, and it's incredibly expensive and difficult process. So illegal immigration skyrocketed, and I want to talk about that and how we reform that, and that's a bigger issue. The other thing is the quote unquote open border of, they used to sort of wait in Mexico. Then Mexico Supreme Court said, no, that's anti-constitutional for Mexico, so we let them stay here, which seems to be the sort of beginning of all the, do they show up for adjudication? Do they not show up? The phones, the tagging, all this stuff. It became a crisis. Why did that Mexico thing happen? They were
Let
staying.
me back up.
Yeah.
Let me go back even further, Shane. I got to tell you, I think the open border is the result of combined failures of Republican administrations, Democrat administrations, and multiple Congresses. Quickly, the immigration is a system, all right? And unfortunately, politicians think of it as ICE agents arresting or Border Patrol agents. And so going back to the early 2000s or mid-2000s in the Bush administration, we saw this incredible investment in border security and in immigration enforcement. The Bush administration really pumped up the number of Border Patrol officers. We went from 5,000 officers, believe it or not, in 2000.
Wow.
You had 5,000 officers making over 1.5 million arrests at the border.
Crazy.
Talk about chaos. I mean, that was chaos. To 20,000 Border Patrol agents that we roughly have today. ICE went from, up to about 7,000 immigration officers from about 1,500 or so,
right.
And during the early part of the Bush administration. The one thing we never did, Shane, was we never plussed up the immigration courts. And I don't want to sound like a dork here, but this is no different than any other system. You arrest people. Now they have to go to court where they get a hearing. And you have to, if the FBI increased the FBI by 5 times, but didn't hire more federal judges or prosecutors, huge backlogs are going to form in the criminal courts.
Yes.
Immigration is also harder than criminal justice. In criminal justice, you say, hey, Shane, you're looking at 20 years in prison. You can sign this plea deal, spare us a trial, and you get 5 years. And people take plea, as you know, 85, 90% of the criminal cases resolve in plea agreements. In immigration, there's no plea agreement. It's either deported or you get a stay. So many cases have to go to trial. So here's what happens. When we've always had on the books these asylum laws that say if you dip your 2 feet in American soil and you say, I want asylum, we can't deport you. until a judge decides that you're not going to be persecuted in your home
Yeah.
country. Actually makes perfect sense. Problem is, we never hired any judges to actually fulfill the legal mandates.
Yeah.
So we already had a massive backlog. When I was the acting ICE director, we already had a backlog of about 500,000 cases in the immigration courts because the immigration courts just can't keep up with all the arrests ICE was making, even during the Obama administration. But suddenly the smuggling groups at the border realized, hey, we don't need to. Remember, they've been trying to go across that border. They've been bringing people across that border for decades.
Yeah.
Historically, they bring them across and you sneak in the middle of the night. And you probably know this, Shane, not to go too far back. But, you know, at first, like during the Clinton administration, there was very little infrastructure in San Diego. So what you'd see would be these massive groups piling up. They'd get together. The smugglers would organize them. You get 500, 1,000 people, and they'd rush across the border. Exactly. And then Border Patrol's grabbing as many as they can, but a good number of them are going to make it.
Yeah.
All right. So then we built the tactical infrastructure in the places it was needed. We surged all these Border Patrol agents. We gave them technology. So the smugglers start leading them through the remote parts of the border in the middle of the Arizona desert.
Classic coyote, what we see on TV and movies.
Classic coyote stuff. Right. Beginning about 2014, they started realizing, wait a minute, why are we doing this? All you have to do is say, I want asylum, and they can't deport you until you have a hearing. And everybody who claims asylum gets to wait 2 or 3 years because those courts are backlogged. Right. And then they can appeal it and get another 2 years. Just tell everyone, start coaching everyone up to do asylum.
They figured out how to game the system.
They figured out how to game the system. We didn't react. We being the tail end of the Obama administration, the first Trump administration, the Biden administration. I personally would have liked to have seen us say, we're going to surge judges. We're not going to abandon our principles of giving asylum, but we're going to do what we should have been doing forever, which is flood money into the judges, have hearings quickly. If you lose your hearing, you get deported right away. Guess what? It would have stopped.
Right.
We didn't do that. Biden tried all these complicated things with the CBP One app. We'll incentivize people not to cross illegally. We'll try to do some parole programs in foreign countries to eliminate the need. I get what he was trying to do, but it didn't work. And the numbers kept climbing and climbing and climbing. And ultimately, he did what I think he didn't want to do. And I understand why I didn't, which was just say, I'm going to modify the asylum rules to basically say you don't claim asylum anymore.
Yeah.
And, so now the people come across, nope, you don't get to wait for a judge. We're grabbing you. We're deporting you. You start seeing the numbers slide down.
Yeah.
Trump took that a step further and the numbers dropped. But I guess what I'm saying is that all of this was avoidable.
Right.
It's a remarkable, though, Shane, that this didn't happen sooner, to be honest with you, because we've rapidly expanded one element of the system, but Congress and politicians don't understand. It's a system. And it doesn't matter how many arrests ICE can make if you don't have the judges to issue the deportation orders.
Look, a great summation there of you have a narrative of open borders and the gates opening and people running through and I think that therein lies the rub, because the solution, as you said, is a systematic solution of we need more judges. We need actually, quite frankly, reform on legal immigration versus illegal immigration.
Yeah.
And then reform on asylum laws. So the answers are quite difficult and hard. But if you're sitting there saying they're eating the cats and they're eating the dogs, and you're like, well, the answer to that is actually a systemic solution, which is quite nuanced and difficult, then they're like, yeah, we just won that argument.
I don't even try, Shane. I'm at that dinner party. You just don't even try. I just listen, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't even try because you're right. It's complicated.
Hey, it's Shane. I'm here talking about something that I love, which is gambling. DraftKings Casino is on fire right now with daily promos non-stop. Here's a good one. New players drop $5 on anything, and you get 350 casino spins. Just like that. No catch, just a ton of spins to mess around with one of their featured slots. Download the app and sign in with code SHANE, that's SHANE, and take the featured slot for a spin and explore thousands of others on the DraftKings game library. Check back daily to claim the hottest offers and promos on DraftKings Casino. The crown is yours, baby.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. 21 and over. Physically present in Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, West Virginia only. Void in Connecticut and Ontario. Eligibility restrictions apply. New customers only. Non-withdrawable casino spins valid for featured game only and expire in 168 hours. See terms at casino.draftkings.com/promos. Ends June 15th, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time.
But here's the secret, really quickly. I work with all these guys who are hardcore, who love Trump. I worked with all these Border Patrol agents, guys
Yeah.
who grew up in the Border Patrol, guys who are ICE. I worked with Tom Holman for years, closely with Tom.
The people of this country mandated President Trump deal with the border crisis, deal with illegal immigration, and deal with illegal alien crime, and that's exactly what we did. We removed terrorists.
Tom and I, maybe not today, Tom and I are guys who are die-hard hawks at the border.
Yeah.
We would sit down and carve out exactly what you described in 5 minutes, the pillars of a comprehensive reform. Fix illegal migration so that there's visas actually for these jobs that employers want,
Yeah.
right? So we don't have to rely on illegal labor.
Yeah.
Get more technology in the border, beef up the immigration courts dramatically. And you kind of, everybody agrees on that.
We
And
all
that's
know the
what
solutions.
everybody agrees, right? It's just that we never get there. Look, the closest we got that, in my experience, was in 2013. Just quickly, we passed basically that bill in the Senate.
Yeah.
It got 70 votes in the Senate and just died in the House. The politics of immigration, for some reason, prevent us from what you could take the most Republican version of me, and in 5 minutes, we would agree on a bill that looks just like what you described. It just can't pass Congress.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why we wanted to talk to you is because, and you've done it today, you're a straight shooter and in my opinion anyway, you're sort of non-paradigmic, non-political. And in fact, as you started off, you're like, look, Biden got there too late. They didn't do a great job. You got to give it to Trump. So, and obviously you were the acting director of ICE under Obama. So there you go. So let's get into it now. I'm already just hooked by what we're talking about, and I haven't got to any questions. So let's go. So Caleb Vitello was your he's same as you. He was the acting director of ICE. He just got reassigned.
The Trump administration parting ways with the head of its Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, division.
Homeland Security officials confirm Caleb Vitello, a career ICE official with more than 20 years of experience, will no longer lead the agency.
I guess because he wasn't deporting people fast enough. You've been on the hot seat as he was on the hot seat. What's going on? Why are they moving him out so quickly 2 months in? And how hot is that seat and why?
I think it's a hot seat. I mean, for a lot of reasons. One is, look, Caleb Vitello was not your ordinary. I don't know Caleb myself, but he wasn't your ordinary acting ICE director. He was in a different unit. I think honestly, what Trump is looking for at ICE are yes people. They're not looking for people to really independently run the agency. That's not a secret. They want people who are going to, you got Tom Holman, who basically is running the agency out of the White House. And then you have this dynamic with the secretary. All of that's a little strange. But the bottom line is Caleb Vitello was dealt an impossible hand. The Trump administration has talked about mass deportation.
Yeah.
To do that, you need massive numbers of arrests.
Yeah.
It is not easy, Shane. And this is what I was saying. I think there's pathways where Trump can get there. But I've been saying this at the outset, ICE, there's this myth out there that I think Trump ran on, that Biden puts these handcuffs on ICE agents, that ICE agents were somehow told not to go out and arrest people. And there's certainly populations that were put off limits. But as you see it with the
Sorry. Populations put off, what does that mean?
Well, Biden administration adopted rules similar to basically the same rule set that we used in Obama.
Right.
Which is, okay, we're not going to take people unless they have a serious criminal conviction. But the real impediment...
The ICE isn't going to go arrest people and find them and take them unless they have criminal conviction.
Yeah, Shane. So on ICE, and this is the way I would view the world when it comes to immigration enforcement. You have the border. So you have people we call recent border crossers.
Yeah.
And then you have the interior.
Right.
So the interior is what people who are here. And generally, we all agree, everybody agrees, it's about 10 to 12 million people illegally present in the United States. That population is interesting. They have generally been here a long time.
Right.
A lot of these people came through in those days, the Wild West days I was talking about earlier, in the early to mid 2000s, when there wasn't much border security.
Yeah.
So at this point, all the legitimate studies about who these people are suggest, I'm ballparking here, 75% of them have been here 15 years or more.
Right.
There's something like, there's different data points, but roughly half of them at this point have U.S. citizen families. They've been here so long, they met an American, they married them, or they just had children in the U.S. who, separate issue, the birthright citizenship, but their children are now U.S. citizens.
Right.
These people are actually getting older. What's interesting is that number's been stable. I mean, one thing lost in this debate is if you look at all legitimate estimates of the undocumented population, it's flat.
Which is very interesting.
We spiked up in 2009. just as all those Bush era 20,000 Border Patrol agents were coming online, the numbers stopped. We've been deporting people about as fast as
very interesting. No, sorry, I'm pointing, but no, I'm just saying that's very interesting because you never hear that number. And that's incredible because as you get in, into these things, it's the same. Like, people talk about crime stats, and then when you look at the overall stats, it's falling as fast as you can fall. And they're like, oh, crime is out of control. Anyway, so the overall number of
we've been actually keeping up. Right, we've been deporting them as fast as they come in. We've been pretty flat for about 10 years now. So this population is older. So during the Obama years and the Biden years, here was the philosophy. We're not going to not do our job and deport people, but let's focus it where we can make the biggest bang for our buck. Public safety and the border.
Right.
All right, now we'll get to why Biden struggled because the border was different during Obama than Biden. And one thing that helped Obama with the deportation numbers, one reason why they were higher was because it was a different border. But in any event, so Biden says, we're going to focus on what we determine to be people who pose a threat to public safety. And you can quibble, Shane, about how you define that. But, generally we look in the Biden administration, they're saying people with a criminal conviction.
Right.
And it should be for something other than like a petty misdemeanor, like driving without a license. Yeah. The kind of a crime that immigrants typically get.
Right.
But Biden was also if he was handcuffed, it was mainly by the border. This is complicated, but because of all these people flooding across making asylum claims, they become ICE's responsibility as they go through the courts.
Right.
So now ICE is having to divert all these resources to all those border cases, those asylum cases. It's limiting their ability to make arrests in the United States. But the bottom line is that's what Biden did. Whereas Trump has now said, okay, we're going to change the definition of criminal. It's going to be anybody who's been arrested for any reason, regardless of whether they've been convicted. And the point is this, that immigration enforcement, at the end of the day, what I was going to say is it's a byproduct really of how many officers you have to make arrests and the back end of the system, the immigration courts.
There's been a lot of arrests of, like, let's say, heroin, dealers and this and that, they're highly publicized, et cetera. But that was like 4, 5, 6 days after and I think I heard you talk about this, that, those hit lists, if you will, or, lists of criminals, they were done under the Biden administration, just sort of executed. Like, this is a sort of ongoing process.
So, Shane, what Caleb Vitello, here's why he gets screwed. Just, he gets in there and they say we want to jump up arrests. It's not so easy. It's not so easy. So where does ICE find immigrants?
Sorry, why isn't it so easy?
Well, here's why. Because ICE has 7,000 officers on day one.
Yeah.
And so where does he go deploy those officers to find the immigrants? The first step is they're saying we want to focus on criminals. So the first place you would look, obviously, is jails and prisons. Makes the most sense, right? Go to jails and prisons. But in the Obama administration, we built that apparatus, meaning we built the tools in place where anybody gets booked into any jail or prison in America, their fingerprints go to ICE. It was very controversial. We called it secure communities. We got beat up badly by the left. But the idea was if someone gets booked into a jail, we want ICE to know if they're an immigrant and they're deportable, so we can grab them in jail.
Yeah, that makes sense. Why would there be pushback on that? So just to be clear for what you're saying, someone gets arrested and put in jail here. You want them to be fingerprinted so we know that if they're guilty of crimes in other countries and ICE, and then we can deport those people. That makes total sense, no?
That's exactly. It makes perfect sense to me too.
Yeah, okay.
It didn't. There are groups on the left, advocacy groups who don't, probably don't want any ICE enforcement at all, but who certainly objected vociferously to that. Well, and a lot of these sanctuary policies are evolved out of that debate.
Yeah.
So as we did this, when Obama, and give credit to the Obama White House, they refused to back down on this. They said it makes sense. Do we want ICE officers out in the street randomly getting people? Do we want them focused on prisons and jails? We want them in prisons and jails where they can get dangerous people off the streets.
Right.
The advocacy groups failed to persuade they try to go around us and go to the White House to persuade the White House to pull the plug on it.
I thought you were the White House.
What's that? I was at DHS.
Oh, so, okay. But
yeah,
Obama
so I'd work collaboratively. Obama was the White House. Yeah, I'd work collaboratively with the White House.
Right.
But, when we refuse, they go to the White House, and then, the White House working with us says no. So then they go to the cities, and they get the cities to pass some of these sanctuary ordinances. Right. But in any event, the point is this, that ICE, so when Trump comes in, he says, okay, we're going to get a lot of arrests.
Right.
So the first place you'd already go is the prisons and jails. But that has never stopped. We're already there.
Right.
ICE is already there. If you're an immigrant and you get booked into a jail, ICE is aware, and generally we're going to take you into custody. Now, a lot of those immigrants, let's say you're arrested for murder. Well, ICE isn't going to get to touch you until you finish your prison sentence, right? So it might be 20 years, but believe it or not, ICE has hundreds of thousands of what we call detainers out there, put on individuals who are serving prison sentences in state prisons and federal prisons, and we're waiting.
Once they get out, we deport them.
Once they get out, we get them, we deport them.
Right.
But we're waiting until.
Yeah.
All right, so now you're Caleb Vitello, and you got to drive up ICE arrests, and you got to do it with criminals. So the first thing you do is what ICE has always also done is do targeting, looking for people who've been arrested, but who were released. So ICE missed them on the front end. That happens, Shane. It happens, in part because of sanctuary cities. Chicago,
which I want to
for
get
instance,
into. Yeah, I want to get into that. But let's finish this one.
So let's say the city of Chicago will say, all right, Shane has been arrested. He was convicted of a felony. He's an immigrant. ICE says, give him to us. We go, no. We release him from his jail sentence. Now he's in the streets of Chicago. So what ICE has to do is find him.
How is that legally possible?
Well, it's very complicated.
No, seriously,
legally.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, well, it's complicated legally, but basically, ICE detainers, those flags I told you about, they are legally requests. They are not. There's no federal law that says you have to honor states. So the states have discretion as to whether to honor them or not.
Yeah.
In some states, as a matter because of these advocacy groups politicking at a local level, have just adopted state laws saying we won't honor them. Right. There are, to be fair, like Boston.
And sorry, what's the ideology behind that? It seems counterintuitive.
I don't understand them. Here's what I will tell you, Shane. I agree. Look, all right, let's talk about sanctuary really quickly. The argument is that it has a chilling effect on immigrant communities from calling their local police. Right. That if immigrants are scared that if they report, let's say they're burglarized, someone breaks in their home, they're scared if they call the police that they're going to get deported. And so the police chiefs say, hey, look, we can't have a chilling effect. I need those people to pick up the phone and tell us what they see. I'm sensitive to that.
They need to be part of our communities rather than separate communities.
Yeah, we need them to report crime.
Yeah.
We need them as witnesses, some cases. We need them as informants. There's truth to that. I get it.
Yeah.
The problem would be that the Chicago, for instance, Chicago would say, we give you nobody. The guy had been convicted of murder, and he's snuck back across the border, and he's an undocumented. He's already been deported once. He came back into the U.S., and he's a convicted murderer and a gang member, and they'll say, no, we're not giving him to you. That's ridiculous, obviously. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I get it if somebody's arrested for driving without a license and they book him because they don't know who he is. They're not saying he's a serious criminal. They just want to run his prints to make sure he's not wanted somewhere. Now ICE comes along and says, give me that guy. And he's lived in this country 10 years. He's got a little kid who's a U.S. citizen. He's a gardener somewhere. Okay, I get it. If you say we don't want to give that guy to you because that could have a chilling effect, I have no problem with that. Trump has a problem with that. I don't care about that. I do care about the serious criminals.
As you're explaining this to me, it's so funny because as you're explaining it to me, I'm just thinking, I love watching the political game. It's what I do. And I'm just thinking, if I'm a politician and one of my aides is describing to me exactly, so I know immigration is a hot button. And someone described to me exactly what you described to me, that like there's killers who are not being offered up because of this thing. I'm like, that's a perfect scenario. To go in and say, can you believe this? They're not. The city of Chicago is not offering up convicted murderers because of you could drive a truck through that.
Hey, Shane, you know what? I'm originally from Arizona, so I'm with you. And I worked for Janet Napolitano, who is a very conservative Democrat, right? And you look at these arguments in Chicago, and you're thinking, what are you thinking? A convicted murderer? How is that politically popular? Getting back to Caleb, the problem was. The ICE he needs to increase the number of arrests.
Yeah.
ICE was already getting 100% of the people out of jails.
Right.
Biden did it. If you got booked into jail and ICE could get you, Biden would do it. He would ignore that low-level guy arrested for, like traffic offense.
Right.
Fine. But the big people, they were already getting. Yeah. They already were doing these street operations. So then what they do is these street operations where now they're running names. We used to call them cross-check.
Yeah.
You run the names of probation, parole, court records, and you start running it through other databases, immigration databases, finding immigrants who've been convicted of a crime, and then running databases of like utility bills or other public records to find those people. And then we deployed teams to go arrest them in the streets. So that's what Trump was doing. So Caleb Vitello needs to increase his arrests. Here's what I've been saying, Shane. It is slow and tedious work to find the bad criminals. The really bad ones, and they got a few bad ones, but the bad ones know they're being hunted. They don't like put their name on a driver's license. They're not easy to grab. They're potentially dangerous, so you can't send one officer to go make the arrest. You got to send 4.
The good guys are easy to catch. The bad guys are hard to catch.
The good guys are easy to catch.
Yeah.
So what's happening here is it was not surprising. Their numbers were pretty much the same as the Biden era numbers. And so now it becomes a political issue. Caleb's the fall guy for that. I think we should talk about as this goes on, what do I expect? How do I expect Trump to do this? If he wants to do a mass deportation, you can't do this targeted criminal approach. You just don't get enough arrests. So he's got to pivot to doing operations that are not targeted. And we're starting to see signs of that.
I love how you gave yourself that question, because that's my next question. So we're thinking the same. Operation Wetback, which I believe was under Eisenhower.
It is a manifest right of our government to limit the number of immigrants our nation can absorb.
By the way, that's the real name. And, sort of ripping families out, mass deportations. And there's some people saying that full 10, 11 million people, are going to be targeted. So you're an expert on this. Going forward, okay, Vitello's gone because he hasn't had enough arrests or deportations. There's been, campaign promises of mass deportations. It didn't work. It was a political disaster, Operation Wetback, for obvious reasons. And, tearing you got to go, like, press, et cetera. What do you see going forward happening? How does this happen? And it seems to be that the system can't even handle it, even if we were to try to do it. And sorry, if you could weave in a little bit of calling up the military into that, because that's a new little wrinkle.
Well, I think that it's clear Trump really is serious about this mass deportation. They're serious about it. But by definition, Shane, if you're just going back to what I said earlier, if you look at the demographics of who the immigrants are, it's not going to be long. It's not going to be long until we're going to have lots of cases highlighted, not these child sex offenders or drug dealers,
low-hanging
but
fruit.
It's these families, the low-hanging fruit. It's just inevitable. You can't deport 2 million people in this country and not be in a year, or 1 million people in a year, and not be hitting that population pretty hard. It's who they are.
Yeah.
And criminals we've been hammering the criminals ripping them out of prisons and jails for the last 10 years.
Does it happen though? Does it happen where the low hanging fruit's gone, the criminals are gone, and then we start just, as you said,
Well, I don't know if he can get there, but I'll talk to you about tactically what he's going to do. But very quickly, just so you know too, that in 2019, Trump's last year before COVID hit, they only arrested 123,000 criminals.
Right.
And the reason is there are just not that many of them, Shane. There aren't that many. And this year, he's not going to have that many either. Right. And that's with his broad definition of criminal. The guy got arrested for speeding. Right. That guy's a criminal in Trump lexicon.
Right.
123,000 arrests they made.
Yeah.
So let's say he gets that up a little bit. We're talking 150,000 criminals. So now, who are the rest of these people?
Right.
All right. So now he's got smart people. He's got people who understand the system and understand the entire system. Like, as well as I do.
Yeah.
Stephen Miller understands the system very well.
Right.
So what do you need to do to accomplish this mass deportation? You need to increase the number of agents who can make arrests.
Right.
And we've seen them do that. They told the FBI, you're now going to play a role in immigration. ATF, DEA. They're going out there signing up local law enforcement, sheriff's offices. That's going to dramatically increase the number of agents. So Caleb Vitello only had 7,000 agents once they got started. They're going to increase that number dramatically by pulling all these other law enforcement agencies into the game. There's lots of local sheriffs, Shane, who want to play immigration cop. They think it's good for their politics.
Yep.
They're going to start getting those deputies involved.
Yeah.
2 is you got to start targeting people, not criminals. So you start broadening the aperture. And then 3 is, remember I told you, as I talked about, the immigration courts are backlogged, and you want to deport that person. So you want to focus on populations, and this is real wonky, but focus on populations that don't have the right to see the judge. Okay, they don't have the right to a hearing before an immigration judge. They are not criminals. They are typically going to be, like one example would be people who just crossed the border recently. Yeah, because they have this rule called the expedited removal rule that if you cross within 2 years, the last 2 years, they can just administratively deport you.
So that's the next target group would be 2-year.
Yeah. Now, part of the problem with that is a lot of those people who came in with permission from Biden. Biden did all these programs to try to stop people from illegally entering. They got very generous with paroles. They give people permission. Okay, don't cross that border illegally. We'll give you permission to come in because you're fleeing horrific circumstances. That's the population they'll be focused on. Now, there's other populations. Shane, there are people who have already been ordered deported. So once you get ordered deported once, it sticks with you.
Yeah.
Here's the problem with that population. That's complicated. In the 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8 era, you'd have these Border Patrol making 1 million arrests. So you have a lot of people, especially, that were arrested by Border Patrol, let's say in 08 or 09. They were processed for deportation that day. They were served a deportation order, and we deported them that day. The Border Patrol drove them into Mexico.
Yeah.
The next day they came back because the coyotes give them two attempts for the price of one.
Wow.
Maybe or 3 attempts. They came back, and this time they made it. They made it successfully back in 09. All right, 16 years have passed, and we stumble upon them. They're doing they're flooding an immigrant neighborhood, and they pull them over, or they, somehow they find them. Well, that person is eligible for deportation because they've already been ordered deported. Of course, the problem with that person, though, is that person has probably been here 16 years.
Yeah,
they've got
has
kids. They go to
and-
church somewhere.
yeah.
They've got neighbors who care about them. They're a nanny for some family that starts calling their congressman. And I will just tell you from being in the hot seat myself that politically that gets real tough. You start getting beat up from all directions. You start getting calls from Republican congressmen like, why are you deporting that guy? He's not bad. He goes to church, my pastor knows him, or he works for my friends down the street, my donors.
That's a hot seat. That's a hot seat.
It's going to be very interesting to me, just being as an observer.
Yeah.
He's going to have to do what he's trying to do. He's going to run out of those cases everybody agrees on, the drug dealer, the gangster.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to dip into this population, and it's going to be real interesting politically how this country reacts. And I'm not saying it's going to be family separation 2.0, when he was separating families at the border.
Yeah.
But I do think there's going to be an incredible political outcry here as they start ripping these people who have been in these communities a long time.
Well, that was my next question is, what do you see going forward for the next person in this hottest of hot seats? What do you see, A, happening day to day in reality, and then B, what do you see happening as a political narrative?
I think day to day, I think you're going to have to tactically, because you got to solve this arrest problem. You're going to have to abandon the targeted approach. You just can't make enough arrests. So they did a case up in Texas the other day, and the name is blanking, a weird little private town development north of Houston.
Right.
And they called it a criminal investigation operation, but really what it was an area sweep. They worked with the Texas State Police, and they flooded a bunch of ICE agents and started pulling over people on pretextual stops, broken taillight, you didn't make a turn signal, and then they checked for their immigration status. They made 100 arrests in about 4 hours or 5 hours in the morning, mainly through traffic stops. They'd hit a few businesses, checking IDs, things like that. That's the kind of operation that gives you the numbers you need, Shane. The problem is you can't say it's targeted. You can't say I'm going after the bad guys. You just can't. It's not. You're just randomly. You're hitting high immigrant areas, right? Like little towns that have a high population of immigrants, and you just flood it looking for the undocumented.
You're just making up a reason to go sweep them.
It's effective in the sense that now, in this case, what I think they were arguing was they have an investigation against the guy, the developer built the town, because he's marketing to undocumented immigrants. I think they're going to try to say they're investigating him for what's called harboring, for encouraging immigrants to come and helping them, whatever.
Yeah.
But the reality is that they need to increase the number of arrests, Shane. And it's just hard to do that when you go on a targeted approach because it's tedious, slow work. It's really slow if you want to get criminals because you got to do a lot of investigation to find out where that guy is, and you got to bring a lot of agents with you. So you get, there's a real debate, Shane, really fast. There's just one tension with ICE. I would love to see ICE become, is that we've all adopted this quantitative approach with ICE, where we measure success or failure of ICE based on how many arrests and deportations they made.
Yeah.
I always wish that we could get to a qualitative approach where, nobody judges the FBI based on how many arrests they make in a year. They judge them based on the quality of the arrest, right? Did you save children? Did you stop a spy for China? Did you stop Iran from getting their hands on nuclear materials or something?
Yeah.
That's how they're judged, by the quality of the cases they make. Unfortunately, in immigration enforcement, we've always judged ICE by the number. But the reality is that the higher quality, the really bad guys, those gangsters that Trump likes to talk about, those transnational gang members, they're tough to find. You got to develop sources in the immigrant community. You got to get informed. You got to do all the same stuff that ICE's criminal side does or the FBI does. Get informants. Use
organized
undercover
crime.
officers.
It's the hardest people to get.
That's right. But you get one, it's high value.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of bang for that buck.
Yeah.
But your numbers are going to roll in and people will be like, my gosh, those are the lowest ICE deportation numbers in history. Yeah, but they're really bad dudes.
Yeah.
The public safety benefits will be huge. But unfortunately, we kind of get into this simple, part of that political thing we talked about. You just get into this simple numerical thing where success or failure is based on how many people you deported, not on the quality of them. You know, I always like to say real fast, like, you know, I think like the FBI, nobody sits there and says the FBI, well, there's people smoking marijuana. It's still a violation of federal law. Go out there and make 1 million arrests of pot smokers. You know, no one cares, right?
Yeah.
But on Iceland, so the FBI says, we don't want to waste our time with that crap because there's no value in doing it. We want to go get bank robbers and terrorists and spies and all this kind of stuff. That, unfortunately, for some weird reason in Iceland, when we in the Obama administration would say, hey, we want to reorient the agency to focus on those really bad guys, that was politically controversial.
Yeah.
Oh, you're ignoring these undocumented immigrants. But they're not a real threat to the country. We got limited resources. Let's focus on the threats.
Right.
In any event, we've gone the other way. We're going with this. I think tactically, we're just going to see larger, less targeted sweeps where it's about how many people you arrest and no longer focusing on the quality of those arrests.
Yeah, that makes sense. Where I wanted to finish today was you said in the beginning, and this is a perfect bookmark if I do say so myself. You said in the beginning that, you know, you can sit down with your counterparts from the Republican Party. You can sit down with the guys currently there. You can sit down with people who know this stuff, and within 10 minutes you can figure out a solution on a bar napkin that everyone would agree and would probably solve a lot of these problems. Two questions is, why don't we do that? And as a follow-up to that question is, how do we do that?
Oh, I'll give you the answer to one. If I knew the answer to two, it'd be easier. Look, under one is just the really it's in the House of Representatives, right? The way the maps are drawn, there are a handful of Republicans who just can't vote for anything that would include legalization for the 10 million, and that has to be part of the plan. And even my hawkish conservatives would agree that has to be part of the plan.
Yeah.
And there are districts, more liberal districts, where you just can't agree on anything that would be plussing up Border Patrol, more technology, more enforcement, you know, streamlining the asylum system, some of the more enforcement-minded things that would need to be a part of it as well. And at the end of the day, there's just enough of those Republicans who I just think for their political lives are at stake that they can't vote for it, enough of those Democrats who would never vote for it, and it always dies in the House. It's passed the Senate before. 70 votes in the Senate and 13. It just dies in the House. But how do we fix it? There's smarter people than me. Shane have been trying for 20 years. Look, George W. Bush, this was a huge thing for him.
Yeah.
He pushed immigration reform. The same thing I'm talking about, the same bill.
Yeah.
Basic parameters, you know, fix the legal system, as you mentioned, plus up more enforcement at the border, streamline some of the interior laws, and then come forward where people who are here illegally, who are not criminals, can pay a fine, can get a background check, right? But it'll be allowed to stay in exchange.
Yeah.
Everybody agrees that's the formula. Politically, we just can't seem to get it done.
Yeah.
And now we're going the other way, and we'll see what happens.
Well, it's early days. We know that this is going to be a huge issue. John Sandweg, thank you so much for spending the time. I'd like to, this is going to be an ongoing thing, so let's keep the channels of communication open, and a rare voice of sanity in the immigration debate. Great to spend time with you today. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you so much.